Those who do not know Patrice Lumumba are not necessarily aware that he was the first prime minister of what is today called the Congo, and one of the major liberation and independence leaders in Africa. And so I'd like to start with Patrice Lumumba because he was a contemporary of Dr. King and among a group of leaders during the 1960s who were concerned obviously about politics, but were also deeply concerned about the moral character of struggle. And that's an important theme, the moral character of struggle. These were people who believed that it was not simply enough to struggle using any means, but to struggle using means that were moral and ethical, to construct a moral and ethical common ground so that you not only wage struggle against the forces of oppression, but you also maintain your personal and collective spiritual integrity in that process. First from Patrice Lumumba, June 30th, 1960. And I'm obviously paraphrasing, I won't read the whole set of remarks. We are proud of this struggle, of tears, of fire, and of blood to the depths of our being, for it was a noble and just struggle and indispensable. We have known ironies, insults, blows that we endured morning, noon, and evening because we are Negroes. We have seen that the law was not the same for whites and for blacks, accommodating for the first, cruel and inhumane for the other. But together we are going to establish social justice. We're going to do away with all discrimination. We're going to rule not by the peace of guns and bayonets, but by the peace of the heart and the will. And I think that's so important, not only to pay tribute to Lumumba, but to set the stage for the drum major. One of the things that I'm fascinated about as I look at great figures in history, and as a sociologist, I'm always interested in other activists and those who are engaged in social movements, is the fact that the greatest of them have a way of writing their own eulogies and epitaphs. Most of us would think that a pretty pessimistic thing to do. But what's interesting is that many of these greatest leaders do that, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, but they do it not so much to glorify themselves, but to leave a legacy, a sense of direction, a template for those who will come after them. And in fact, they think it quite important that someone does. Too often we forget that we are inspirations, we are examples, we are being watched by others. And so each act that we do, each word that we say, each opportunity that we engage is being inspired, and it is inspiring and uplifting to someone else. And so therefore we have to be very conscious to what it is that we do. And so now I'd like to draw your attention to Dr. King's own words. It's important to use context, because sometimes when we deal with Dr. King, especially on his birthday, we get things out of context. I remember Malcolm X said something like, everyone says revolution, and he says something along the lines of, I'm inclined to believe that some people are using that word rather loosely. And I think the statement he makes is pretty relevant for Dr. King, because as they quote Dr. King and they play excerpts of Dr. King, they often forget the context in which he said things. He's not actually writing his eulogy, the eulogy that gets attached to him. He's actually delivering a sermon. And the sermon is called the Drum Major Instinct. And not only is he delivering a sermon, but he is drawing on a theological tradition from a Methodist preacher who happens to be white, named J. Wallace Haflin. And Minister Haflin, in giving this sermon, is trying to teach a lesson about something he calls the drum major instinct. And so Dr. King takes this sermon, which is already in the theological literature, and he actually molds it to the purpose of his time and his context. He says, if any of you are around when I have to meet my day, I don't want a long funeral. And if you get somebody to deliver the eulogy, tell them not to talk too long. Every now and then I wonder what I want them to say. And he goes on, he says, I don't want them to talk about the Nobel Peace Prize. I don't want them to talk about the awards. By then, he had hundreds of them. I don't want them to talk about the schools I attended and the credentials that I amassed. I want to stop there for a moment and reflect on what that means about Dr. King. Because we live in a world where people who have credentials like to share them with us. Some of us, especially in the academic community, you know, I am Reverend, Doctor, and we love putting all those letters. Some of us have alphabets, whole systems behind our name. But of course, that's no indicator of wisdom, certainly not spiritual wisdom. It's an indicator of educational attainment, of having gone through a particular system of instruction, but it does not mean that the consciousness and the moral fiber of the individual is in place. So Dr. King wants to establish very early on that my moral character is in place. I don't want you to talk about the Nobel Peace Prize because, you see, that draws attention to me. I won the Peace Prize. I don't want you to focus on my awards because that's about me again. I don't want you to talk about my school because there might be somebody listening who hasn't been to school and hasn't won a Nobel Peace Prize. And so instead of getting my message, they're going to start to feel like, you know, gosh, I feel bad about myself. I don't have a Nobel Peace Prize, and I didn't go to school, so maybe this message is not for me. Have you ever been somewhere where you heard credentials said or you heard experiences presented, and since you couldn't identify with those, you were kind of cut out? But Dr. King wants to invite you in, and he says, so therefore, don't make it about me. Make it about something bigger than me. And what was that? I want somebody to say, I tried to give my life to others and for their cause. I want you to say that I tried to love somebody. I want you to say that I tried to be right on the question of war at a time when it was not cool. You might know such a time as this time. I want somebody to say that I fed the hungry. I want someone to say that I clothed those who were naked. I want someone to say that I went down and visited the prison. I want someone to say that I sought to love and to save humanity. And what's interesting about that is I don't want someone to say it because I did it. You know, sometimes the worst thing that happens to an activist is to be memorialized. One of the first things I said, if I ever do anything of note, which I doubt, time is running out, but if I do anything that somehow suggests that I'm worthy of remembrance, please don't build a monument. Because something happens when we build a monument. You know, I often wonder why we celebrate. People talk about celebrating the life. That sounds good. Certainly it's a noble life. We want to recognize a life. We want to acknowledge a life. I get a little nervous when we celebrate a life because sometimes what we're celebrating is the anomaly of the life, which is not what the activist wants us to do. What happens when you build a monument? Whatever was in there is over. Right? Right? That monuments are built when whatever it was that we're going to memorialize is done. Right? So we have a World War II monument which says that, you know, World War II happened. We want to remember that it happened and we want to reflect on, but it's gone now. But you see, Dr. King's legacy, Dr. King's dream, if you will, Dr. King's vision, which is a better way of describing it, is not gone, it's not irrelevant, it's not done, it's not completed, and Dr. King doesn't want to set up a scenario where he's going to be celebrated and somehow not followed. Dr. King has a set of requirements in his speech, the drum major instinct. I often think we memorialize, I think of Mother Teresa, Pope John Paul II. Think of these great moral people. We can certainly put King in there, or great activists. Insert whoever you believe is a person at that level of moral and ethical fiber. You ever notice how do we celebrate them because they inspire us to action? Or do we celebrate them because we're like, man, they did, I'm glad they did that, because me, I don't have any plans. Right? I mean, do we celebrate because we want to acknowledge them, and in that acknowledgement we're saying we won't follow? Dr. King is saying, if you do not follow, then I may have lived in vain. We don't want him to have died in vain. He says, I won't have any fine and luxurious things. Some people glorify their things. I had a lot of stuff. I remember George Carlin, the comedian, used to talk about a place for my stuff. And he talked about our materialism. And he said, yeah, first you grow up and you want to get stuff. And you get the stuff, then you need a place for the stuff. And then you need more stuff. And then you need another place to put more stuff because you got more stuff. And he goes on with this routine. And of course, the point of the routine is the sheer meaningless of all those things. So Dr. King wants to establish, actually, when you remember me, when you think of me, there's no fine and luxurious things that you can pile up for me. But what I want to leave behind is a committed life. In Judaism, there's something called the ethical will. The ethical will in Judaic theology. And Judaic theology, the ethical will is actually a directive, right? Those of you familiar with a will know that it's a directive, right? If you write a will, it's a set of instructions to do something with your passing. And so Dr. King is giving us not a kind of epilogue or conclusion, but a will to what it is that he wants to have done. He says, if you want to say anything about me, say that I was a drum major for justice, that I was a drum major for peace, that I was a drum major for righteousness. Dr. King doesn't say or do anything by accident. That's another thing you learn about committed people. They don't make accidents. They don't just say stuff. So it wasn't that drum major sounded good. You know, so I think I'll throw drum major. He could have described himself as an outstanding orator. He could have described himself as an amazing minister. He could have described himself as president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He could have described himself any number of things, and all of that would have been valid, but he says, I'm a drum major. Now that's significant. It's theologically significant. It's culturally significant, and so we need to put that in context. He says, I want to be remembered as a drum major. Now, I've already said he's creating an ethical will, so he's asking us to do something, and so whatever it is that we're supposed to do must be somehow connected to this idea of him being a drum major. So we need to figure out what a drum major is. It's amazing how many people read the story and don't tell me nothing about what a drum major is. We can't simply say that he's a drum major. Well, what does that mean? This comes from that drum major instinct sermon. In that sermon, he draws from the book of Mark, chapter 10, the 35th verse, where it reads thusly. And James and John, the sons of Zebedee, come unto him, saying, Master, we would that thou shouldest do for us whatsoever we shall desire. And he said unto them, What would ye that I should do for you? They said unto him, Grant unto us that we may sit one on thy right hand, on the other on thy left hand, in thy glory. But Jesus said to them, Ye not know what ye ask. Can ye drink of the cup that I drink of, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? And they said unto him, We can. And Jesus said unto them, Ye shall indeed drink of the cup that I drink of, and with the baptism that I am baptized, you shall be baptized. But to sit on my right hand and my left hand is not mine to give, for it shall be given to them for whom it is prepared. So let's look at this situation. Here we have two people who are asking the Lord, you know, we'd like to have the key positions in heaven. You know, me, I'm just happy to get in. But they want, and you know, this is something about the nature of human beings. It's not enough to get in. I want to sit at the head table. I want to be somebody important. I want to sit on the right and sit on the left. We want to go ahead and lock in our seats because we're going to be VIP. And the Lord responds to them and says, do you know what you're asking? Do you really want to follow me? Drinking from the cup means, do you want to go through the path that I went through? Do you want to understand the suffering that I went through? Do you want to pay the price that I went? You really want that? And of course, sometimes we say we do. We do the same thing for people that we honor. You want to follow Dr. King? That's 99.9% of people say, yeah, I'm down with King. We all down with King. It's King Day. Everyone in the country is down with King. But look at the country. Somebody's not down. Actually, there's a lot of people down. They're down in poverty. They're down in suffering. They're down in oppression. They're down in prison. So that means somebody didn't hear the drum major. What is the drum major? Well, a drum major, of course, at one level is the leader of a band. So the first thing we understand is that there's no such thing as the solo drum major. So again, Dr. King is calling attention to the fact that I'm not out here by myself, I'm leading a band. And of course the band he's talking about, he says, is the band of justice, the band of righteousness, the band. But now, if it turns out I don't have a band, we got a problem, right? A general that is not leading an army is a person taking a walk. And some of us are taking a walk, right? And think we lead the army. He says, you know, I'm a drum major. And so if drum major is to have meaning, if it's to have definition, somebody better be in my band. Are you in his band? The next thing is, the drum major is positioned at the head. It's important to understand that the drum major is not the band director. The band director is the ultimate authority, but the drum major is positioned. Position is a verb. It means you were put there. To be positioned. And so here you have King, who is animated by the power of God, says, God put me in this position. I was placed in this position. And if he has a place for me, that means he must have a place for you. Are you in the band? If you're in the band, that means you have an instrument. Is that right? Right? You can't just stand around and be in the band and have no instrument. Right? Somebody's going to, if it's just a cymbal. I remember we had a band where, you know, there were people who were in the band club and we didn't really have any more instruments, so we had them a cymbal. They got to have something to be in the band. We don't want them just standing around walking with a uniform. You got to have an instrument. And then when you have an instrument, better play it. Don't let us catch you not playing. Do you have an instrument? Can you write? Do you have an instrument? Can you think? Do you have an instrument? Can you educate? Do you have an instrument? Can you visit somebody in prison? Do you have an instrument? Can you help out the elderly? Do you have an instrument? And then, if you have one, are you playing? Or are we all just kind of looking at the beauty of our band uniform? Now, drum major said, we got to play. The drum major is dressed more elaborately. But the drum major, even though he or she may be dressed more elaborately than the rest of the band, relies on the band. We still don't have a drum. So that means you might think I'm important, Dr. King is saying. You know, I might have fine clothes or a high status, obviously, in the movement, certainly higher than most of us have. But I'm no higher than the band. It's the band that gives me definition. It's the band that gives me meaning. I am the head of the movement because there is a movement to be the head of. Is there still a movement for righteousness and for justice in the world? The drum major tells the band where to march. It's important because many people get in trouble for putting on the uniform and taking their instrument and going to the wrong location, right? If you think about it, a lot of social corruption happens because you're in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people. You need a drum major to say where it is that we need to assemble and march. And when the fight is for righteousness and justice, if in fact nobody shows up, then we have a problem. Somebody should show up. He tells us what to play. Dr. King clearly establishes what to play. He says we're going to play in the key of love. That's a different key, because see, you don't have to play in the key of love. The world will give you other keys to play in. There's a key of greed, there's a key of envy, a key of jealousy, a key of hatred, a key of resentment, all of this stuff, and the world will say, play that tune. That's the one that's more popular. You ever notice that there are musical artists who will do anything, say anything? Just think about it for a minute. Right? Anything at all. No moral consciousness, because this is what's popular. This is what's now. But Dr. King says, no, this particular band was assembled by a supreme band director to achieve the performance of righteousness and justice. And so therefore, you got to play the right tune. We play in this band in the key of love. What time to keep? What time to keep? You got to be on time. If the band gets there too late, If you've ever been in a band competition, you know timing is everything. You're late, they don't give you extra time. They dock that against your score. You can lose the competition if you're not on time. And so we can lose a social opportunity if we don't step into the moment. Something tragic has happened in this country just recently. That's a moment. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for those who are in the band that are being led by the drum major to start sounding the alarm that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. To begin sounding the alarm that the military-industrial complex, which drives a system that invades the lands of people and destroys their lives, is wrong, and to say that even if it's not politically popular. But that assumes that there's still band members around. Do we hear the drum major? What's important also is that he chooses the drum major. Could have had the tuba major. How about the saxophone major, the cymbal major, the oboe majors? No, it was the drum major. Because in the tradition, if you know anything about the African tradition, it's got to be a drum. You have all other kind of instruments, but we ain't going nowhere without the drum. And the drum was used for two purposes, primarily. One was communication. Communication. The talking drums, they were called. That when you heard the drum, something spoke to your consciousness, it spoke to your mentality, it spoke to your spirituality and made you move. Believe it or not, if I broke out an African drum and I started playing a rhythm right now, your heart, your lungs, and every part of your anatomy will begin to vibrate according to the frequency of that drum. So it's not just a musical principle, it's an energy principle, it's a physics principle, it is a cosmic principle. And so, and notice that we'll all start vibrating at the same frequency. Right? We'll all be together vibrating. Are we vibrating on righteousness all together at the same time? Or are we all out of frequency? Because we don't have any more drum majors. So now everybody's playing a different tune. And instead of sounding like a unified band led by the drum major, you know, half of the drum corps is on that side, the other half's on that side. Well, just because you want to play in the key of A, we're going to play in the key of C. And nobody's playing in the key of love. Nobody remembers who the band director was. And no one remembers the drum major. The other use for the drum was to set the stage. To set the stage, besides communication, to draw everyone together and to set the stage. Usually the drum is used, we use the drum to call the ancestors. We use the drum to bring the people together. It means something's happening. It means calling out when there's pain, calling out when there's suffering, and assembling the people to do something about alleviating that suffering. I think the theme of Ghostbusters was who you gonna call. When there's injustice, who are you gonna call? You see, when there was injustice, the drum major showed up. And he brought the band with him. And they started to play. You ever had a song to uplift you? You ever been down and had a song to uplift you? King is talking about playing a song. See, the world, the society needed to be uplifted. And he said, I'm going to lead the band and we're going to play a different kind of song. Now, this was a strange song. Everybody didn't hear it at first. Because there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise in modern society. There's a lot of distraction in modern society. There's a lot of detractors in modern society. But he said, you know what? I'm still going to play. You ever seen a band where there's a lot of distraction and stuff, but they just keep on playing? But because ultimately, if they keep playing, you're going to hear them. Somehow, the sound of the band, if it's all unified and it's all at the right time and it's all in sync, it will begin to rise above all of the noise and distractions and everything, and you'll be able to hear the sound. So when Dr. King says, I'm the drum major, he raises this Judaic concept of the ethical will. He says, is there anyone still wanting to lead? Going back to that biblical passage, you remember the two brothers want the place of the drum major. This is why it was called the drum major instinct. Everybody want to be first, right? I don't want to just be in the band. I want to lead the band. But there's a price to lead the band. Are you ready to be a leader is the question here. Are you ready to be a leader? We want, as humans, fame and fortune and status, but the question is, are we willing to get fame, fortune, and status in spiritual terms rather than material terms? Dr. King he was famous, but in a society that at the time was not his friend when he left this world. The reality was, as much as the government will make 1,001 speeches, at the time, they actually called the Nobel Prize Committee and told them, do not give the Nobel Peace Prize to Martin Luther King. He's not a patriot. He's a traitor to his country. And that's his government's opinion of him. So it's important to understand that as he played and as he sang this song and conducted this band, the country wasn't liking the tune. And when he attacked Vietnam, the country really didn't like the tune. And when he said we must make fundamental economic changes, perhaps even an economic revolution in order to redistribute resources so that no one would live in a position of poverty and hunger, some folks just didn't, they just wanted to turn the sound system off then. You know what, we just need to unplug this. And so they killed the drum major. But guess what? A little problem when you kill the drum major. Because if the band was true, there's still a band. Right? If there really was a band and the drum major was really leading it and the band really believed in the song, then when the drum major falls or goes aside, everybody remembers the tune. And you know what? You're going to play. All I got is my little instrument. And I might be the only one standing out there, but I'll play. I'll play in the memory of the drum major. Not merely celebrating his life, but continuing what it was that he did, which was to play this song called righteousness, called love, called fairness, called justice, called equality, called an end to racism, called unity, and ultimately called doing God's will. I'm going to play. And maybe when I step out there playing, I'm the only one. But guess what? Somebody else remembers the tune. Somebody else is going to be like, you know what? I think I'm going to get up and play. Maybe the two of us not going to make an awful lot of noise the first time, because it's a lot of noise. All the other instruments have gone by the wayside, but then maybe we'll have 3. Can we get 4? Can we get 5? It's like the old auction line. Do I hear 25, 35, 45? Can we eventually get the whole band reassembled? And you know what? The key of a drum major is that when the band is reassembled, drum majors will appear. Drum majors are picked from those who play. And so we often ask, now that King is gone, now that X is gone, now that Medgar is gone, now that somebody's gone, where are the leaders? Somewhere in the band. And all I need is to get some folk willing to play. Because I have no doubt, the band director, when he starts to hear somebody playing, he's going to select somebody from this reconstituted band to be a drum major. Sometimes the leaders don't arise because the band's not playing. Are you playing? King left us some instruments. He left us the music. He left us a world that needed to hear a song. And he taught us how we can